just so that anyone else can join us. So that's going. And we're at 11:31, so I shall get ourselves underway just as we see the numbers rising slightly. So, good morning and welcome to this Jersey Chamber of Commerce husting for St Brelade, and I'm delighted that we have some of those who are candidates who are joining us here. Helen Miles, Monty Taddier, Carl Bush, Steve Bailey and James Corbett have joined us. Thank you all for doing so. The first role that I've got really is just to explain that there is a little Q&A box at the bottom for viewers, and they can add their questions in there, and we'll do our best to weave those in best we can throughout the next hour and a quarter. We'll also have some subjects and topics that I've been advised by our chamber membership would they be really interested to get your thoughts on. So that's really where we're going to head, but we start off with a quick 2-minute round robin. I'll just get my timer ready because I think I should always have a timer just in case, so that I can at least accurately say you need to stop now. So 2 minutes from each of you, and Mary's just joined us. Hello Mary, good morning. So we'll start off with the 2 minutes, and I'll go first time round in order of those that I can see. So James, I'll come to you first. Can we have 2 minutes from you on you and your manifesto?
Yes, good morning everybody. I'm James Corbett. I'm the Alliance candidate in St Brelade. I'm a lawyer. I specialise in commercial and trust litigation and advice, and for the last 20 years much of my professional work has been in small islands and territories, usually with a large financial services component to it. Before I turn to some specifics, I'd like really to give a brief article of faith. Policies come and go. They're in the moment, they deal with specific questions, but principles endure. So far as I'm concerned, government has an important role in the economy. But the government isn't an entrepreneur, and it shouldn't be doing business unless there is an overwhelming case for it to do so. And it shouldn't be trying to supplant those who do business. What it can and should do, in my view, is to facilitate what the private economy does best, which is innovate and trade. And it should also police compliance to ensure that the interests of consumers are protected, and most importantly, perhaps, that no one is left behind for want of opportunity. Now, what do I mean by facilitation and in what areas? First and foremost, it involves a recognition that intervention in one part of the economy is going to have an impact somewhere else in the same economy. It's not just that there's no such thing as a quick fix, it's just that they're not quick and they seldom fix anything. The solutions we're looking to present to you as voters are longer term, and first comes education. If there isn't the highest quality education, none of us will get anywhere. And the rising population and rising generations will have nothing to look forward to. And it applies to every part of the education system.
James, we're already at 2.25 minutes. So I'm going to be fair I'll give everyone 2.25, and we'll come back to some of those.
I'm fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Steve Bailey, you're next up. And so 2 minutes, if we can have, 2.25 minutes from your good self.
Good morning, Murray. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name's Steve Bailey. I'm known to Chamber of Commerce. I have sat in the past on 2 committees, both of them to do with, one to do with tourism, one to do with transport. I've lived in Jersey now for 25 years. I was the Jersey Director for Condor Ferries for 15 of those years, and they were very busy. I got to know the industry incredibly well working for the company and also government as a whole. I took on the role as the Games Director, NatWest Island Games Director in 2013, pulled that together working with a team once more, very collaborative team, and we posted the biggest of the games to date in 2015, under budget and on time. Why am I standing? I'm standing because I do believe that we have to get new blood into government. I want to see change. I believe that I can bring that about if I was elected with the Progress Party. Steve Pallett is my running partner in St Brelade. I believe in collaborative approach to government. I think that government has become too small in its way of thinking. It hasn't become collaborative across the whole spectrum of government. I want to see strong measures being taken to address some of the big issues that we are facing. I want to see a transparent government. I want to see government working for the whole, a fair government. And has already been mentioned, I think we have to look across the generations. We are seeing a rising the elderly numbers, and I think that is going to cause us problems. We have to ensure that our young come through an educational system that prepares them properly for their future and for the island's future. And that may be that we have to start looking much more at vocational training for a lot of people that don't actually aspire to go into university and tertiary. So I'll come back on other issues later.
Yeah, muting myself, that's really not the right way forward, is it? But thank you, Steve. Grateful for you stopping at the 2.25 minute stage. We'll carry on with these round robins of each manifesto. And next up is Monty. Monty, to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Murray, for hosting this. I suppose the first thing to say is that I did have a life before politics. So people might think, oh, Monty's now an old boy, part of the Old Boys Club. He's been in there almost 14 years. But before politics, my main passion and interest, amongst others, was tourism. So I worked in tourism in Jersey. That's where I cut my teeth, if you like, before and after university. But also I had a wide interest in teaching. So I was a language assistant, travelled, taught English, and I did run my own translation business in Jersey before going into politics. So I am perhaps more rounded, but of course I'm well known as Monty, the politician from St Brelade. And I hope also there'll be a life after politics. I'm sure so some of you can give me hope there. What I'd like to say is that nobody has a monopoly on good ideas in any particular context, no particular political party, no particular political individual, and it's not a case of private sector versus the public sector. I'm very open-minded to innovation, and what I see in the economy, I'll just give 2 examples here, is that one practical one that I've used and I really enjoy is the EV bikes and the EV cars. There's something which have been led by the private sector. It didn't need to be the case, but often we find that the private sector can be more swift of foot. And of course, there needs to be a partnership nonetheless between the public sector, because, for example, they need to park their cars and bikes somewhere. And that's a good example, I think, about how innovation can help the community. It can help the goals that we're all striving to, particularly the green goals that we're all, I think, and hope signed up to. The second example is what I think is a very interesting area about what PricewaterhouseCoopers are doing at the moment with their trial about the 4-day week. And I think, for example, if that had been led by government, there'd have been a huge public outcry. If the government said we want to put public sector workers on that, I think you get my point, and I've come to the time limit. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, grateful for you acknowledging that. Thank you very much, Monty. Let's go to Helen next. Helen, good morning to you. Let's hear a little bit about you and your manifesto.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for hosting this, Murray. I'm Helen Miles, and I'm an independent candidate for St Brelade. I spent over 30 years working for Jersey's public service, customs and immigration, probation, the police, and then latterly as a government policy director. I'm currently the Vice Chair of Autism Jersey. I was one of the founding members over 17 years ago, and I hold several academic lecturing posts. If I'm elected, my priority for St Brelade is to establish a parish improvement project to enhance our amenities, and that especially and in particular includes the Llanfair Parade and Precinct. Unquestionably a desire amongst business owners there to work together with government and the parish to bring more colour, energy and custom into that area. I think that should include a trial lease of a unit by the States to provide a community hub for services out west so that we don't always have to go into town. So my manifesto's on my website, sets out policies for addressing the housing crisis and for improving educational outcomes. Both of those are really important for business. If we're going to equip our future generations with the appropriate skills to give them hope of a secure life in Jersey, we need to address both of those quite urgently. Evidently, staff recruitment and accommodation are big concerns for business. That's what people are telling me as I'm walking around talking to people. And I support the wider use of the 9-month work visa, but also trying to address the short-term accommodation issues by enabling local families to let spare bedrooms to seasonal workers without being taxed on that income. I also think it might be helpful for just some of the hundreds of extra staff employed by the government in recent years to be available instead for businesses. There are good jobs and careers waiting in your industries. We're moving in tough times, we're going to get tougher, and I think we should explore the options for a time-specific GST holiday, delivering a 5% reduction in bills, encouraging local spending and supporting businesses across the board. In particular, I want to see urgent improvements to the service provided by Revenue Jersey, currently letting far too many islanders down. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you. Look forward to the questions.
Thanks very much, Helen. Appreciate it. Carl, it's over to you and your 2 minutes worth, 2.25.
Thank you, Murray. Carl Bush, independent, standing as an independent for St Brelade. Where I come from and where I envisage that I'll be going. My experience is in community interest. I've run my own community interest business now for the last 3 years, as I've stated in the manifesto. What I have achieved in my professional life, sorry, the phone's going in the background, it's distracting me. My academic qualifications that I have reskilled within the last couple of years are involving financial crime and social inclusion. Now, through my community interest project, what we've been able to do is, first and foremost, we were looking at including people who become distant from community and incur social isolation as they age. But what has happened in the most recent period of the last couple of years with COVID is that we've identified that the older generation are actually becoming digitally distanced because of the progress of products and services online. So what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to focus in on where I hope to be going, as in my own person. My age demographic is in the 55 to 60-year-old bracket. And when you look at the aging population, that is the bulk of the population that is going to cause us the most pressure as we go forward over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because we're all going to be, we're 55 now, we're all going to be 60 at the same period of time. We're all, that population bubble is going to be 70 at the same period of time, and 80 and so forth, and that's where the pressure is going to remain.
Carl, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. And the last to give their 2 minutes worth, 2.25 minutes worth. I asked Monty earlier on if he didn't mind me calling him Monty, because that's what I've been used to calling him for such a long time. Mary, you're happy with Mary, or people know you as Moz as well? What are you happier with?
I'm known as Moz. I'm not sure why I'm I probably need to change that on the screen.
I'll change that in just a minute. So, Moz Scott, it's your turn.
Good morning. Government needs state members who can unravel complex financial and legal issues. A successful business background can help government deliver good results. In the 1980s, I was a tax lawyer in the city, advising FTSE listed companies on mergers and acquisitions. In the 90s, I was a partner in a local commercial law firm and the director of its company administration business. Both led the market, despite a shortage of qualified staff. Factors for our success included reorganising our priorities to be more productive, investing in technology and staff training, and fostering a rapid learning culture. Statistics show Jersey never fully recovered from the 2008 recession. The island now has more economic challenges. Many local enterprises look to the finance industry and government for business. But government's growth is unsustainable. The finance industry is vulnerable too. A third of local jobs could be lost to global technological advances by 2040. Brexit, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, inflation and climate change targets are fresh challenges. The Economic Council has identified new economic opportunities. Government's management of itself and of the economy needs to change to pave the way. A blitz on tax anomalies and red tape is needed urgently. The project I facilitated on how.je provides details of the propositions I would pursue if elected, as does my manifesto and votemoz.je, to support the future prosperity and well-being of all islanders. Please vote for me if you can. Thank you.
Well, that was before time, so I mean that's just marvellous. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thanks, Moz, and thank you to all of our candidates.
Delivery.
Excellent. So this is the St Brelade online hustings for the Chamber of Commerce. If you've got any questions, the Q&A box at the bottom is where you put them. We have plenty of subjects to discuss and we'll never get through them all. In fact, if we went into depth in just any one of them, we'd probably be here longer than a Bridging Island Plan debate in the States. So let's get ourselves underway with the first of those subjects that Chamber members are very concerned about, and it is the concern of population, rising population, a decreasing population in compared to where we thought it might be, and the difficulties that that gives to businesses in terms of being able to recruit. We'll come on to talk about housing in a bit, but I dare say that will come into it as well. So population and the population policy. Are we getting it right? Have we got it right over the last 4 years? And where do you see we should be managing our population going forward? Those are the subjects that really our members are most keen to talk about. I'm going to come to you first, Carl, if I may, as the first on this, and we'll try and change the order each time we go through the questions. So a minute or so from you, probably a little bit longer, I dare say, on population. Where do you think we should go?
Right, okay, well, it's interesting to see that the last census actually shows that we've overestimated where we were going to be on population. Now, obviously, COVID has had something to do with that, but the problem is, from what I can see, is that our data is rather skewed. It doesn't seem to be, in this technological age of digital, trying to get us all digitally included, the data is always dated by the time we get it. So we really need to sharpen up as to who's here and who's left. Now, I don't want to go into the aging population, but what I've heard, one of the most alarming thing that's been brought home to me regarding population in the last couple of weeks is what I've heard on the doorstep, and that is Jersey people born here thinking of leaving the island because of the cost of living. And that encroaches into housing and the daily cost of living and bills and so forth. So population, we will need, we were at the, I was attending the Jersey Primary Care seminar a couple of weeks ago, and I just need to re-verify this, but I heard there that the underlying consensus was that for every 2 people retired by 2035, 1 will be working. Now that is alarming. I just need to re-verify those figures, and I'm trying to re-establish that today, because that's a lot higher than what I had previously read. Now, that may be due to the fact that younger people will be feeling the pressure even more so than they have done in the last decade, going forward, looking forward to the next 10 years. The pressures that we are experiencing in the working market are going to be exacerbated, and that is what we need to address urgently.
Okay, it sounds it's a recurring theme here about from a previous hosting, which was about data. So, you know, maybe that's something we'll unpack a little bit more, and we'll come out from some of the other candidates. Helen, over to you with regard to our population and your concerns, or moreover, your solutions.
Okay, thank you. There's absolutely no doubt that Jersey needs economic migrants to support our key services and sectors, be that healthcare, hospitality, retail. Migration is a feature of Jersey's history, and it will need to be so, I think, moving into the future. But I don't think there always needs to be a link between work and long-term residence. And I think we should be using more the 9-month work visa for individuals. I think Jersey's an attractive place for people seeking short-term work. We've got good jobs, competitive pay, but the challenge around that is providing the quality short-term accommodation. And I think that's the challenge that we need to address. Internally, i.e. around Jersey, we should be creating many more development pathways in local industries for our young people at 16 and 18 and after graduation. There's examples of very good practice in business of developing local people, getting into the schools early and then providing them with career pathways through and out of university. And I actually think that the civil service should be leading the way in providing opportunities for local people, reducing our dependency on immigration. So there's the balance there. And one of the things I've said in my manifesto is that I believe strongly that the public sector has a duty to advertise and prioritise Jersey-based candidates for civil service roles. We've got out of the habit of looking locally. We're just assuming that there is no talent here and that people don't have the necessary knowledge, skills and experience. So I would like to see the civil service only appoint people when they've absolutely ruled out all the possibilities for appointing or appropriately developing people from before going to off-island recruitment.
Okay, I'm just going to, because you're under this sort of 2.5 minutes there, so I'm just going to come back with a question that's just come in, which is, do candidates feel the education system provides young islanders with skills required to meet the needs of the economy? Are there any changes that could be usefully made, and how would government assist? So just going back on what you're saying there, what you're saying is we need to train and grow our own. Do you genuinely think that that will help some industries such as agriculture and tourism? Because try as they might, that's really difficult, and those are both meaty. Between the two of those, you know, if you include retail as well, that's more than the finance industry in terms of numbers.
I think that there is a very big disconnect between what's going on with Skills Jersey and what actually businesses really need. And one of the things that I would like to see is something like a separate hospitality school. At the moment, we have offers up at Highlands, but they tend to be for a small amount of people. It tends to be lumped in with the other further education and potentially higher education. Yes, we've got trackers, but I think there's an opportunity for Jersey to have a centre of excellence in hospitality, potentially run by the private sector as opposed to government.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I'll stop you there, because we will end up having a a conversation between the two of us, which I think would be unfair on everybody else. Monty, going to come to you next on this. Population, we've had population policy. In fact, you've sat through an awful lot of it and a lot of that discussion over the last year or so. I wonder what you and the Reform Party make of that, and what the idea is going forward for our population.
We're not going to do this justice in whether it's 1 or 2 minutes, so I'll try and focus targeted responses. The first point is that we're in a very different position to what we were 2 years ago as an island and as an economy. And there's a very real possibility that in the future we'll be talking about a population problem in terms of underpopulation and in terms of not being able to recruit. In fact, that's the current situation, the latter point. At the same time, I think if you ask the question, even if there were no immigrants in Jersey, and you ask the question, do you think there are too many immigrants in Jersey? The answer from many people would come back as yes. It's just one of those popular and populist responses. So I would say that culturally, I'm very much in favour of the talent and the mix that immigrants have and continue to bring to the island. And they're important not just for the economy, but for the wider community. I've seen that the vagaries that the 5 and 10 year rule system creates, it doesn't work to control the population, and it causes lots of hardship in many cases. One quick example, I've got a live case of somebody who was brought over here on a 5-year license in a good job. The 5-year license is no longer now needed because they've got their 5 years residency, so that's been withdrawn. But of course, the property they live in, the home they live in, it needs that license, and that they're now homeless. And they've got a stark choice of going back to where they came from and uprooting their family, or staying. Now, one possible solution is that, and I think there are other benefits for this as well, is to look at seriously to having a university in Jersey with both vocational and academic courses. That would mean that on top of that, there would be an ongoing student population who would want and perhaps need to work here, and they could perhaps fill some of those roles. I also think that the 9-month rule for visas and work permits effectively don't suit all of the industry, all of hospitality. One quick example is that a gentleman who works at one of the hotels in the Bay has been coming to Jersey for 30 years. Those hotels are open 12 months a year, yet he has to go back to Kenya for 3 of those months, even though the hotel doesn't want him to, even though he doesn't want to, and it costs him a lot of money and a lot of pollution in terms of the carbon emissions. So I think we need to listen to the industry and work more closely to find solutions that actually work and not be dogmatic.
Monty, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Moz next. Moz, your thoughts on our population and population policy.
Thank you. So this comes from the fact that so many businesses, including and government itself, are fighting for immigration labour without addressing how we're losing it at the same time, how we're actually losing labour, how people are leaving. We've got COVID, Brexit, cost of living, all of these things are disincentivising people coming here to work. So we need to look far more at local training and succession planning. We have some kind of pointers there in the new the Economic Council's report, but it's something that employers too have got to be more proactive about. We need to increase productivity per head. It really has been seriously going down, and again, that means recognising that there are changes going, that there is a 4th industrial revolution. Yes, you can use technology to make yourself more competitive to a degree, but in many cases, that's not just going to be possible in terms of investment cost, in terms of global competition. So there needs to be a lot more smart thinking within government about these issues. The minimum wage, actually, that, and to some extent, deprives some really quite successful businesses of local labour. So I have more recently thought, no, we should actually increase this to the living wage with some exceptions, because I do accept that there are certain industries which we want to keep because of, for other reasons, but we need to kind of basically do more there. We need to have more of a focus about the distinction between the not employed versus the unemployed, because we do have a median age of 52 years in our population. There are some people, more people perhaps, who would work part-time and employers not actually offering that. We need to be more clear about the differences between businesses and cost centres, and examine how we support them, and if we support them. And finally, yes, education. We need to do a lot of work there. Sure, we've come up with yet another policy strategy to kind of advance PSHE. The World Economic Forum talks about the skills that we need, but we need delivery. And again, my manifestos and HowJE looks at how we can do that.
Thank you for that, Miles. This is almost a yes/no answer that I'm seeking here. Monty raised the issue, or the proposal of a university for Jersey, and Helen talked about a possibly privately led scheme of a centre of excellence for hospitality. So, just looping the two in there together, are you for a university? Would a university in Jersey be something that you would see as the right thing?
I can see many positives. I do have a proposal of getting our independent education specialists to look at that, because I don't think it's an answer that you can just say, yes, we definitely must have one. We've got to look at the kind of, the consequences and these sort of things. But generally, we need to do a lot in terms of making education more attractive, and it could be one way of doing it.
Okay, thank you for that. James, to you and our population now and going forward, the policies that you think we need to put in place.
Yes, we've spread ourselves rather wide on some of the answers to what starts as a question of arithmetic. I am an incomer. I did not have the privilege of being born in Jersey, and I haven't lived most of my life here. And I truly did wonder at times how my arrival would be greeted by Jersey men and women. Because the first thing you think about when you hear the word population is not about population, it's immigration. And if there is a topic more designed to bring out both the best and the worst in people, I have yet to encounter it. And I wondered when I saw views being expressed about population, whether it was just a proxy for that. And I'm very glad to say that I haven't really encountered that at all. The people I've spoken to about population have seen it as a matter of practicality. There hasn't, in my experience, been the slightest suggestion that we don't want insert name of nationality, race, or background here. So first step is that. It's a matter of practicality. Now, people have spoken about education because we all are interested in that. People have spoken about the university, and I would like to finish with that when I get to it. But we can't avoid the question of demographics. I just reminded myself of what the impact of zero immigration would be. In 2015, there was a dependency ratio of 50%. The people working and the people not working, equal numbers and supporting each other. In 3 years' time, it's going to be 59%. 10 years after that, by which time population is beginning to fall, it's going to be 71%. And we simply can't, it seems to me, bring in people to replace the babies that we don't have on the island, or the skills that we're not prepared to equip people with, so that people do have to come in. Now, the picture changes if you admit even 1,000 people a year, because the dependency ratio just is much, much lower. It's still high, but it's much lower. But the population isn't. The population, if you increase it by 1,000 a year, increases very substantially indeed. Now, the worst thing, it seems to me, is that Jersey people should feel, or long-term Jersey residents who've made a home here, that they simply have to go because they can't afford it, not because they feel under pressure from the attitudes of other people, but that they're driven out by the inability to support themselves in work or in home, or that their only future really is supporting others and not making a life of their own. I'd like to finish, if I may, with the university, since you posed that question.
Yeah, sure.
The numbers are feasible. The US Virgin Islands, which has 105,000 population, about the same size as Jersey, has its own university. So it's not a matter of numbers necessarily, but I am not convinced that it will make sense for there to be a University of Jersey. I think inviting other universities to move specialist departments here, or to have an outreach system by which people can move between the UK, say, or France, say, and Jersey would be much better. And there's more to talk about if we ever come back to that topic.
Indeed. And thank you very much indeed for keeping that brief. Steve Bailey, it's a long way around the table, but we've got to you. So your thoughts on population, and you'll have seen that in the various guises through your past.
Absolutely. I think it's an issue that's been ducked for some considerable time, and it's almost come to a head now. And I think we feel that the aim should be to ensure a working population, and James mentioned this as well. We've got to get a working population so we get the stability in the dependency ratio. That's very important in this discussion. And then we've got to look at what our industry really needs. We do have a very vibrant tourism industry, and over time that's come under pressure for various reasons. And I think that the 9-month, as Monty mentioned, the 9-month license, I was in discussions with that about 4 years ago, and it was quite clear that the 9-month license was going to put people under pressure. And I think we have to relook at that. One of the other things about population is I think that we have to look, and it's got to be constantly reviewed. Our industry is constantly changing. I believe that we do have to, Helen mentioned as well, about looking for career paths for local people, taking that from a very early age. And when I say a very early age, I mean as people develop through school, looking to see how we can take pupils and actually offer them a career path through into one of our home-based industries. It always seems ludicrous to me that in some industries, or not some industries, but some states-led departments, we look for people from outside of the island. It's not as if we have a career path within a major department that we can take people through. Police, as an example, we've continually had chief of police that come from the UK. We have people here, I'm sure, that could have taken those positions and done an excellent job. So population, I do believe that it's changing all the time. We have to get the levels right. We will have to look at how we are going to pay people. It's not an attractive island for people to come here and work in tourism anymore. I've been in that industry a long time. It's expensive to live here. The living, most of our industry doesn't pay the living wage. That creates a problem in itself, but it's no longer an interesting place to come to in terms of work. We've lost our European workforce. We lost that because of Brexit. It happened very quickly. It's caused problems. So I think our view is that we do have to have some controls. If we do go down any kind of immigration control in the future, it's got to be points-based. Lots of countries are adopting that, and we would back that. I can't hear you.
Yeah, because I've done it again. Try to be quiet when you're talking. Yes, thank you, Steve. That begs the question then of the other subject that I was asked to broach with the candidates of the Hustings, which is housing, and housing being one of the main pressures of not being able to recruit people, even if you could find the talented person from off island, because there is a shortage of people on island and the figures suggest that. So we have a housing conundrum in that we can't house people that are coming here to work, which for the economy interests of the chamber members is quite focused, but also the cost of housing generally in the island, which has lots of external pressures on it, of course. But those are all rising costs for a business when they're considering employing someone, because people need to cover their own personal costs and they go to work to do that. So how do we square that circle of housing, and where is the future policy for this? I've often seen that St Helier has been known to take a great deal of the burden of housing, but St Brelade is not immune to that and has very large areas of housing. So should it have more? How do we develop that? So housing and possibly the impact on your parish is probably the next subject to go to. Monty, can I come to you first on this with housing and where reform sits in terms of what it wants to do with housing?
So there are clearly going to be different strands. I mean, the sensitivities around housing are not limited to one sector, and your particular interest in it may be slightly different to the general, I think we've all agreed is a housing crisis in Jersey. We know that, for example, of the 4,000 empty properties that existed in the last census, 500 of those are in St Brelade. And St Brelade's actually got the second largest number of empty homes that exist, even though we're not the second largest parish by population. So there's an issue there. I think we've also got to be mindful of the fact that there have been some shifts, because property, or homes as we might call them, are much more sought after, and they're lucrative from a developer's point of view or from a landlord's point of view. We've seen a shift. It's easier to make money from just renting your property out to a long-term tenant, for example. And that's what's happened with hotels being closed down. There's also a pressure, for example, in terms of Airbnb. Understandably, people who have maybe an empty unit or an empty room might want to let that out. And we've got a completely unregulated Airbnb situation at the moment, which I think has both opportunities and challenges for Jersey. But we know that that's also contributing, I think, to the housing shortage. I don't think there's an easy solution. I think we need to, again, talk to industry about what their needs are. We've probably, again, I think the industry's been a victim of those shifts in terms of the housing market. So where there might have been accommodation above certain premises, so, the pub might have had a flat or a few flats where the staff would live, or hotels would have had, staff accommodation. Not all sectors can offer that. So I think it is a conundrum. I think ideally we should make sure that people have somewhere to live when they come over and when they're looking for employment. But in a sense, you can't live in Jersey unless you've got a job. You can't afford to pay the rent. So yeah, maybe that sounds like there's not a lot of solutions, but I think the problem government has is that when there's a shortage of housing, you have to target that housing towards need. And the need, I think, is predominantly for Jersey families who have been here a long time to be housed.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Moz next. Moz, your thoughts on the housing crisis?
Well, really, it illustrates the need for better management of land resources by government and better management of financial resources, and also the actual problems that we have in terms of the economy not being lackluster anyway, because it's just created a perfect storm in terms of not funding social housing sufficiently. We know that the immigration is a kind of factor as well, and we've discussed that. Also, just the lack of enforcement of its own policies that are actually meant to help control this. I came across a case where I was arguing against an existing house being turned into a guest cottage for a wealthy resident. And sat in front of the planning committee, and indeed one of the past deputies of St Brelade who was on the planning committee supported that very action, it being turned into a gatehouse. So we need to be a lot clearer about the way we manage these resources. And I agree that vacant properties we need incentives. We need also to bring into account that, you know, we can't just say, right, okay, we'll control rents. We need to take into account things like maintenance costs, construction costs, how the supply chain is actually affecting those in terms of building. So it's a complex issue. And another sort of idea that is in the manifesto is actually to look a bit at some of the funds that government has in terms of pension funds and whether we can even use those to improve social housing, or with the intent to improve the supply and indeed to perhaps redevelop some of the actual properties even in government's possession. There are lots of houses that need redevelopment in places like St Helier, and actually being able to be more, think much more about the areas that we want to preserve as historic environment and areas that we do want to develop and actually create much better housing and more housing that needs to be considered too.
Moz, thank you very much indeed. I am hearing that theme of message running through of the empty housing and the underdeveloped and the unused as an interesting theme that's coming out here. James Corbett, what's your take on the housing crisis that we have and how we might resolve it?
First, I do accept that there is a crisis. If you don't face up to that, then it's difficult for anyone in government, whether as a participant or as a facilitator, to actually address the problem. I see the major difficulty as being one of matching supply and demand. And I congratulate, I suppose for a few more days, they are the government, aren't they? But the government of the last 4 years and the 4 years before that, for at least recognising that there was a serious shortfall in housing that required introduction. And you've only got to walk around the streets to actually see that there are building projects going on, and they are seeking to address the mismatch of supply and demand, which has driven up prices, both for purchase and for renting, that we're talking about now. Now, do I think they've got it entirely right? Well, I don't think they do. But the problem is there's no magic wand that anybody gets to wave and say, ka-ching, we'll have 10,000 houses there, thank you very much, in the next 12 months. Not least because when you think in terms of what the major parts of land use in the island are, 70% of all the land in Jersey is either given to cultivation, 50%, or natural land, so to speak, beaches, sand dunes, and so on and so forth. Now, who's rushing, by the way, to say, tell you what, if you're not going to farm that, we'll have you farm? You contribute 1.2% to the gross added value value added rather, of the economy here. So what we need is more housing. These are the kind of intractable questions that any government is going to have to face. And by the way, I'm not knocking farmers when I say that. It's a matter of arithmetic if you're speaking about controlling supply and demand. I am concerned when I hear the suggestion of taking currently empty dwellings into some form of public ownership or some compelled letting. It's not that I like the idea that there are substantial numbers of properties which are currently void, but everything matters before you start confiscating other people's property on who they are and why it's happening. Now, there are at least, let me take the two particular kinds of landlord. Those who, corporate landlords who own a very large number of properties. What's your reason for having a 10% or whatever the percentage is, lack of occupancy about it? If you're an individual and you've got your own property, or maybe you've got a flat next door, all rather different, isn't it? I'll stop there, Murray, because I think I've rattled on a bit, but no more than anyone else.
No, absolutely. Trying to keep it as fair and even as I can. Monty, did you want to come back with something there? Because I saw you raise a hand at some point.
Only quickly, it's just that I'm interested in the point about land confiscation. I've not heard anyone advocate that empty properties should be confiscated or compulsory purchased. But I just wanted to check that what I do know is that the mainstream decision that was almost universally adopted in the State Assembly was that there should be a mechanism to discourage long-term empty properties. And I think that's where we're at, about disincentivizing people keeping properties empty. By all means have one empty, but if you choose to keep it empty for long periods, you will face a financial penalty.
Yeah, Monty's quite right. I haven't heard anyone suggest either confiscation or enforcement in that form. I'm trying to get to the point of principle. What is it going to be if it's not going to be that? And that's the debate we have to have. And I've done my bit, so I'll shut up.
Thank you, James. Steve Bailey, housing, whether it be in St Brelade or island-wide, it's go on.
Well, clearly, Murray, we all recognise we do have a crisis with regards to housing. We've identified a number of things here. I think one of the things that we have to do, and everyone's mentioned it as well, we do need more properties in the market. Properties are coming on the market, but it's the level of price that those properties are coming in at that we have to look at as well. So again, it's looking at our population and it's trying to match housing to go with it. There's a lot of work going on at the moment about new types of construction, which is very encouraging. Low cost, almost prefabbed houses that can be brought in. But I haven't heard that we've actually identified any existing brown sites that we could use for developments wherever they are in the island. No one's actually come along and said, well, we have this site here, we could do this. And the other problem we may have then is, have we got the people that can actually, because the companies that make these houses, these new prefabbed houses, they can make them very fast and get them out in numbers. It's the speed at which we can construct them if we have the land that's available. And of course, it's a tough one for us, because the government is going to have to look at how it protects the value of the existing homeowners, how we build houses, who are they being built for. We keep hearing that it must always be for first-time buyers. Perhaps we have to look at the other end of the market. We've discussed an aging population, and I'm sure that there are many people here that may think about downsizing, but they don't want to just downsize to a small apartment somewhere. Do we need to try and address the whole market, starter homes, family homes, retirement homes, so that the market itself can actually be mobile? So people at one end of it that own the 3-4 bedroom houses, family have flown, can actually move into a smaller place, but somewhere that's really nice for them to move to. It happens all the time in the UK. Bournemouth, Poole, they have big developments for retirement. So I think we have to look at the whole thing and identify where we're going to build to start with.
Building on an island that's 9 by 5. Always going to be a challenge. Steve Bailey, thank you very much indeed. Helen Miles, it's to you next that we go.
Okay, thank you, Murray. I suppose one of the advantages of going nearly last is everything that I wanted to say has kind of been said. But I think what is clear is this is the very definition of a wicked problem. You know, there are no instant solutions, and the housing crisis in Jersey is multifaceted, and there are many priorities. You know, urgent action is required, but actually, what should we prioritise? What should we do first? We know that we're losing the skills of our homegrown talent because they can't afford a home in Jersey. We know that many people are leaving to seek lives elsewhere. And for lots of parents, you know, of the electorate, that's heartbreaking that our children can no longer stay here. So as well as the affordable housing, there also needs to be support to buy those housing, what Steve picked up about the cost of housing. I think we know that actually finding the deposit is a real challenge. It's very difficult to find a deposit if you're already paying an awful lot of rent. So I think we need to look at schemes for assistance with deposits, and definitely shared equity schemes as well must be more available than they are currently. Of course, we want to give priority to first-time buyers. I am absolutely in favour of a complete ban on foreign buy-to-let. I think if you already have a home in Jersey and you want to own a second one, there needs to be some disincentives to that happening, particularly with houses that are around the first-time buyer limit. They need to be given priority. The census has shown us that we've got so many empty properties. In Northern Ireland, there's a scheme whereby if your property is empty for over 6 months, you're taxed at 3% of the market value until it's either let or until it's sold on. And other schemes, certainly in the UK, are what they have a no-use empty scheme. We know that in Jersey people are asset rich and cash poor, and there are schemes whereby local councils support people to bring up their properties to a standard whereby they're rentable, and then start deducting the money by means of a loan. And I think that's something maybe Andium could support us with. The last time buyer houses, I think, are really interesting, particularly for St Brelade, just knocking on doors. If you think of the family homes that we've got around Kennervay Park, Clodagh Sarb, St Brelade's Park, most people are saying we would move, we would downsize if we could find something in the parish. They don't want to move out of the parish into town. Their community's here and they're a very important part of that. Local estate agent told me that if you could bring on, 40 one-bedroomed or 1.5-bedroom units in St Brelade, he'd have them sold by lunchtime. And that would free up an awful lot of first-time buyer properties into the market. So, I don't think anybody's in any doubt this is a crisis and we need some creative thinking, we need some innovation, but above all, as Steve said, we need a joined up approach and we need to navigate it successfully. It's not just looking at the bigger picture, but it is actually about sliding down into the details and being a little bit more creative. And if I've got time, the other thing that I would say is that we need to start reducing some of the bureaucracy and the regulation about the creation of 2- and 3-generation homes. Some of these big properties could quite easily be converted, but there's an awful lot of bureaucracy and regulation around that involving planning, which puts people off.
All right, fine. Something's just fallen over, but thank you.
The dog.
The dog. Yeah, it's there's always a tough decision to be made sometimes by politicians, and it's whether they take them or not. Carl Bush, to you on the subject. You're the last one to speak on this particular subject, and then we're going to do a quick question that's coming from Stephanie for everyone. So, Carl, first of all, on housing.
Okay, well, the joys have been last. I have had a career in the mortgage industry, and basically we are the success of the economy on the island. We're the victims of our own success. So we've got a hugely skillful finance industry that attacks high income earners here. We've got products and services that, through its own success, attracts people wanting to buy here. I know that there are restrictions and you've got to jump through hoops to do that. But at the end of the day, all these high earning, capital rich, intensive individuals that come here drive the value up. How do we solve that? Well, we don't want the economy to tip, that's for sure. I've actually lived through 2 property busts, boom and busts. I've seen them come, I've seen them go. I very much doubt that that will ever happen here. But what we have to do is we have to stabilize things. We've mentioned that we've got this aging population and the pressures that will have on us. My age group, 55 to 60, we're going to be in that population bubble as we move forward over the next few decades. Now, I think not only do we have to try and find a solution to the problem now, but we can't take away the fact that there may be an even bigger problem down the road. Now, how do we address that? We've got to be innovative. We've got to consult with communities. We've got to consult with how people want to live in the future. Now, the short, quick answer would be a colossal building plan, wouldn't it? Now, that isn't going to happen. We need to cherish our agricultural land. That is our investment for the future. We're talking about food shortages on the horizon. We've just had a cost of living price rises. We've got this war going on in Europe. Okay, sorry, I've just seen your hand. I'm detracting a bit.
No, that's fine. But I think you're making the point there about the value of having land that you don't develop and protecting our green fields. So point well made, and thank you for making it. As I think one of you, I think it was Monty, who said it on more than one occasion, we're never going to solve issues such as housing and population in 2-minute sound bites, but this is an opportunity for voters to see their candidates, and so we appreciate you giving us your thoughts and your times, albeit curtailed by me every time you get into the flow of it. Stephanie wrote a very good question that I thought it was really interesting, and I know that Miles and Monty are replying to the candidates' thoughts on St Brelade, so I'll leave you to do that in writing. But the population question from Stephanie is population, housing and red tape. They've all been mentioned, and issues facing businesses. Do candidates feel that government understands small and medium-sized businesses? And what are the 3 things, you don't have to list 3, but what are the 3 things that you would do and make a priority to change or support if elected? So what are your 3 things that you, as a priority, that you would change or support if you were elected? I think is the nub of that question. And we'll start this time around. I'm trying to start with someone different each time. Steve Bailey, what are the priorities for you to support or change should you be elected?
With regards to small business?
Yeah, small,
I think,
yeah,
I go back to what James said earlier on. Actually, I don't think it's government's job to actually get involved in business. Government's job, I would want to see it stand back and make the environment right for business to flourish. So we could start off with small government, actually making government smaller but more efficient, standing back, taking some of the red tape away from that businesses have. I'm horrified sometimes. I've got a number of friends who have their own small business, small to medium business, and I'm horrified at the amount of paperwork and red tape that their business may need something, and something urgent, and it may be something like a new small processing building, and the amount of paperwork and planning that delays that actually happening. Business is generally very successful if it can actually plan something and implement it quickly. Business can go out and get more business if it can do that. If they have to come face to face with departments that continually put roadblocks in their way, that creates them problem, it slows business down, it slows enterprise down. So I suppose my thing would be to make sure that government made the environment right for business to flourish, and secondly, to take some of that red tape away, make it easier for that people. That's I think a real thing that government could do.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. I'm pleased we're keeping it to one thing that you would do, which is going to be much easier in the limited 10 minutes or so that we've got left. Helen Miles, let's come to you second on this. Helen, what's the one thing that you would change or support that for small and medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, I think I've got a couple actually. As Steve said, I think it's down to the government to provide the environment in which businesses can flourish. And certainly with my Autism Jersey hat on, sometimes government just has to get out of the way. Because they put up so many barriers and so many obstacles. Businesses generally know what they need to do and how they want to do it. So I think it's important that those obstacles are removed. The second one is I think they can provide an environment around skills. We need a highly skilled workforce, and I think there needs to be some training opportunities that are delivered by the government, particularly sort of in generic areas. I spoke earlier about potentially supporting the development of a hospitality school, supporting maybe the development of an agricultural college. We don't actually have any agricultural education, as far as I know, on the island, but also getting behind some of the higher education opportunities that we have to make sure that in the round the economy is supported. So those would be my two things.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to go to Monty next. Monty.
Thank you. Because it's a little bit of a political debate, I'm going to mildly disagree with some of the previous speakers. It's too easy to say, and we know it plays well to the Chamber of Commerce audience potentially, to say that government should just get out of the way. I think it's more complicated than that. There was a saying in post-war Germany, which was so viel Markt wie möglich and so viel Staat wie nötig, which means as much market as possible, but as much state as necessary. And I think in Jersey, we really have to have that conversation about what is the role of government, what is the role of the state in terms of assisting businesses, in particular small businesses. And there is a time when it's right to get out of the way and let businesses flourish. But I think that we've seen some great examples of where the private and public partnerships can work well together. And I know that's already tainted in a certain way as an expression, because we've seen some bad examples in the UK, perhaps in the 90s. And what I look at is what I managed to achieve at Culture, Arts and Heritage. And we're starting to see the fruits of that with secured funding, which is long-term sustainable, which isn't going to be taken away. And as I was very sad to hear of the passing of Philip Hewitt-Jabor, who did some great work with Art House Jersey, and he said to me, it's so important now that we've got that seed funding, because it means we can go to the private sector. And now that they know government take these things seriously, whether it's the arts or whatever sector we're talking about, could be sport, and we've seen some great things in the triathlon, it means that those conversations can be now had, so investors will come on board if they know that government are taking things seriously. So I think it's about targeting that effort. It's about looking at what works well, for example, event-led tourism. But I think also talking to businesses and saying, like, if we want more apprenticeship schemes to be taken up, then we need to be also co-funding that, I think, so that we deal with issues such as housing, with population and long-term economic goals that are both common to the industry, but also to government. So I think there is a third way, if you like, about having proper listening conversations between government and industry. I'll leave it there, I think.
Thank you, Monty. Carl.
Well, yeah, this is a big part of my manifesto. I'm a community interest business, and I work as a social enterprise in Jersey. However, I can't work as a community interest business over here. My community interest business, a limited community interest company, is registered in the UK. Well, why is that? Well, it's quite simply because we don't have the structure here. It's so frustrating. We talk about social enterprise and we have social enterprise businesses, but they're connected with charities. And if you don't have the community interest statement and you don't have the infrastructure, which is registered at the Jersey Financial Services Commission, people can't see how you run. You've got to have an independent statement where they can see exactly how your business is run, and if they fund you, how that funding is going to be used. Now, the thing is, at the end of the day, is a community interest business has to be self-sustaining. It doesn't run like a charity. So you have very, very successful individuals running social enterprises. But I don't want to go around the houses too much because I'm running out of time. But we're behind the curve here. We really need to get the structure in place to enable social entrepreneurs to have a go. They're innovative and they're able to fail and learn and pivot from their failure and try other things without incurring too much cost.
All right, Carl, thank you very much indeed for that. Moz, you're next up on this one. So what would you make a priority to change or support if elected? With a mind to small and medium-sized businesses.
Joyce, thanks for your question, Stephanie. Yeah, some things have actually been said, and I'm often actually contacted with examples. So in terms of immigration licenses, even just recently, there was a bit of a kind of halt on that, because it's not just about government getting out of the way. Sometimes government needs to be responsive. It should be there at certain times. Planning, I hear about Farm Shop who kind of like was selling projects to try products and was told, oh, hang on, you're not allowed to do that. And now it has to go through the kind of planning process, and that's too slow. So government's got to be quicker. Infrastructure. Yes, we once had a tourist infrastructure fund. In the most recent years before it got closed, it was actually spent mainly on sports trips. That I found outrageous. New entrants, that's really kind of important. The actual preservation of commercial sites for businesses to operate at a lower cost than perhaps, if the site were for residential development. I tried to actually get that changed recently in the Island Plan debate in the case of hotels in the Bay, having done a lot of research there. And unfortunately, the States Assembly, on the basis of anecdotal evidence and lobbying, didn't actually support that. I had also contacted the Minister for Environment, Economic Development 2 years before that to actually say, let's look at this. Also, we did come up with, I put forward through Mike Jackson propositions to ensure that commercial premises weren't allowed to get dilapidated and turned into residential. That still needs to be kind of sorted out. So I hope it helps.
Thank you. James Corbett, you have final word on the final part of the question. What is the one thing that you would make a priority to change or support if elected?
Well, I'll sell you one and I'll give you two for free. First, de-lump big and SMEs. They're not the same, they don't have the same concerns, and I should like to see that states sponsor a small business forum. If you can have a youth parliament, you can have a small business parliament. Secondly, I think that fees for applications that have to be made by small businesses can be, because they start with very little to begin with, disproportionately impacting on those businesses, and they should either be cut to nothing or cut to a nominal amount to encourage business. And lastly, it seems to me that you'll not run any kind of business if you don't have access to banking facilities. Good luck with trying to open a bank account if you're a new small business, even if you are, a lawyer going solo to get them. In that case, I think that the government should be putting pressure on the banks to do their bit for diversifying the economy.
James, thank you very much indeed. I'll finish up with a final comment. I was I may have been smiling during the answer to that last question, but as the CEO of Chamber of Commerce, I very often get half of the membership saying to me, why isn't government doing enough? And the other half saying, why don't they get out of the way? So you can't win in either way, but one thing's for certain, you've all got an election to enjoy as best you possibly can. And on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, we wish all of you in the parish of St Brelade as candidates the very best of luck and very best wishes for what's going forward. We look forward to working with some of you, and we hope you enjoy the campaign and your time should you be elected as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Murray.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.